Good morning everyone. So today we will learn about strategies in designing and developing 3D user interface. Before we get started, let me introduce to you my group member. My name is Ainin, Sofia, and we have Asmitha, Afifah, Natalie and Joscie. This topic will discuss about some general strategies and principles for designing 3D user interface, which is high-level strategies that can be used in a wide variety of 3D tasks and applications. And some are designed to match 3D user interface to the basic properties of human psychology and physiology. Others are based on common sense, rule of thumbs, or cultural metaphor. What is the rule of thumb? From what I know, there are 10 rules of thumb in User Interface Design Guideline. It is called as Nielsen and Molich User Interface Design Guideline. And what is cultural metaphor? Cultural metaphor is designing all user interface according to the culture of the user. Next, simply combining iconic interaction technique does not necessarily guarantee an intuitive, easy to use and enjoyable user experience, which means kalau awak guna iconic interaction technique, ia tak bermaksud apps tu senang digunakan atau user tu lagi suka guna benda tu. Mungkin ada setengah yang suka dan setengah lagi yang tak. So tak ada guarantee sekiranya awak guna iconic interaction technique tu, ia akan memudahkan lagi pengguna tersebut. And next, strategy and principle can be roughly divided into two large groups that can affect each other. First, designing for human, and second, inventing 3D user interface. Designing for human needs strategies to match the design of interaction technique and application to human strength, limitation, and individual difference. We have learned this and used this in our HCI class last sem. And next, the second group is inventing 3D user interface. It is designing technique based on common sense approach, creative exploration of 3D UI design or rules of thumb. So, what is designing for human? Most interface design principles from general user interface literature can be applied to the design of 3D UIs. Many have been studied extensively in the field of human factor research and include reduction of short-term memory load, consistency of interface syntax and semantic, feedback, error prevention, and aesthetic appeal are as important in 3D interaction as in other human-machine interface. I gave you one example. For example, the consistency of interface, syntax, and semantic. Contohnya, kalau apps tu, untuk homepage tu mula-mula kan, biasanya ada gambar icon home. So dekat situ, contoh awak tulis dekat situ home. Tapi bila orang tekan option lain, macam page lain lah. Page lain, tiba-tiba bila dia nak back balik ke home page, dekat situ dah tak ada home. Tapi awak tulis dekat situ menu. So orang tak tahu macam mana nak back to home balik. So orang tertukar sama ada mana satu home, mana satu menu. So dekat sini sebab itulah konsistensi ni penting. So kalau awak dah guna home, proceed dengan home saja. Jangan campur-campur home sekejap, lepas tu menu sekejap. So nanti pengguna tu akan pening. And next, expanding to the third dimension, however, brings new challenge. For example, designing for user comfort, which requires different design strategies that are usually not explored in the traditional user interface literature. And the second group is inventing 3D user interface. It is often necessary to invent a new technique. General 3D user interface technique may not be applied in all different kind of application. Maksudnya, tak semua app ni sesuai digunakan user interface 3D. Ada yang sesuai and ada yang tak. While human factors-based principle can offer valuable insight into how 3D UI should be designed, they are not always prescriptive. More formal methods inspired by human factor research and informal, such as rule of thumb approach that have often been used in creating new 3D UI.
Assalamualaikum and hello, saya akan continue dengan unconventional interfaces. While designing for human, we tend to optimize interfaces for user limitation. Perspective has been proven effective in many applications. Close analysis of human factors always useful. However, looking at human factors issue only as potential bottlenecks may also be limiting. Researchers have also been looking at the potential of the human body rather than its limitation, as an approach to design novel interaction technique has proven useful in gaming systems, for example. Feedback in 3D user interfaces refer to any information conveyed to the user that help the user understand the state of the system, the result of an operation, or the status of a task. Information may come from the system, from the environment, or from the user's own body. Often important to provide sufficient levels of feedback to the users and ensure compliance agreement between different levels and type of feedback. So dekat sini feedback tu dia bagi information provided by the game which allow player or user to see their progress during the game, which show how much, contoh dia macam masa, dia akan show how much time you have left to complete the task or to finish the game. Another example is the health bar. In this case of vitality goals is a general interface in most games as it helps the user can see and can estimate how much life he has left to complete the level. So feedback dekat sini didatangkan dengan 3 keadaan. Yang pertama, feedback from system. Yang kedua, feedback from environment. Dan yang ketiga, feedback from user's own body. Feedback in 3D user interface. Sensory dimension of feedback include all human sensory channels. Interface designer can affect all but self-produced feedback, kinesthetic and proprioceptive cues. From a system point of view, POV feedback can split into 3 categories, iaitu reactive, instrumental and operational. Boleh tengok dekat link YouTube dekat situ. Substitution iaitu penggantian maklum balas. In designing and developing 3D UIs, it is often difficult to allow for all possible type of feedback. In particular, haptic feedback often requires devices that are expensive and difficult to operate. In the absence of haptic feedback, substitution principles have often been used. Many examples of sensory feedback substitution in VR, some of which are surprisingly effective.
Hi, so passive haptic feedback or props. It matches the shape and appearance of a virtual object with the shape and appearance of a physical object. The user can both see and feel the virtual object and receive the type of instrumental feedback. In other words, passive haptic feedback provides users a tactile sense of the virtual tools they are using. So, for example, if they are touching a gun, they would feel a gun. If they are touching a wood in the game, they would be feeling sense of the wood. So it can provide an inexpensive physical and tactile feedback, significantly increasing the sense of presence and ease of interaction. So the users or the gamers would feel more immersed and present in the game or the virtual reality environment with such passive haptic props. So it establishes a common perceptual frame of reference between the device and the virtual objects. So it can increase the ease of use and also makes it easier to learn the 3D user interface. However, it requires multiple trackers and performance improvement has not been shown yet for this such haptic feedback. So, for example, um, the Dragon controller that has been used as you can see, this is a standard VR controller. Is vibrotactile haptics and also feels lightweight, which means the user would feel a constant same weight throughout their VR experience. However, this is a Dragon, a shape-changing VR controller and providing a dynamic passive haptic feedback. As you can see, it changes its surface area, it changes the size so that the user can feel the different weight and also the different drag force. Like for instance, the gamer or the player is in the game dragging something, pulling something. They would feel they would feel it real because the controller is creating such feel. So moving on, is this is also an example of a two-head interface with a passive haptic feedback provided by the doll's head and also cutting plane tool held by the user. Constraints is the relations that define some sort of geometrical coherence. Coherence here means its connection of the virtual scene during the user's interaction with it, which means when during the interaction, while the user is moving and how is it, how does the object interacts or what are the objects in the environment that interacts with the user. So it can be simplify interaction while improving accuracy and user efficiency. And in order to that, constraints are also known relations between the 3D virtual objects in a scene. It does not consider the type of objects which is involved. So different as long there's an object. And there are several types of constraints that can be used in 3D user interfaces. For example, physical realistic constraints. And it is very popular nowadays to find a physical realistic constraint. Here you will find examples of how the modern and how much realistic games, videos, and for the users of VR. See, for example, this is example of a real constraint, a physically real constraint. It looks very real for the users, and there's also many types of constraints, such as the London roller coaster, where they feel more immense and for more immersed and also more present in the game. And secondly is the dynamic alignment tools. And dynamic alignment tools helps in the recalibration and repositioning of the controllers and also the system in VR. As you can see, they're trying to reposition, and this user is moving left and right, up and bottom to recalibrate it. Yes, and next is the third one is intelligent constraints. So constraints can reduce user control over the interaction and can be very effective design tool for the 3D user face. This is because constraint helps to prevent user errors. As for reduce user control, it is because there's restriction for the users to go out of control in a VR environment. For example, there's manipulation and also various types of navigation in a game or a video. So next is a two-handed control. Two-handed control allows users to transfer their everyday manipulation experience and skills to 3D user interface. So they can also significantly increase user performance on a certain task. For example, driving. You use one hand for changing the gear, another hand is to steer your steering. As other than that, we have pilots who uses VR to learn how to learn piloting without them before they go out into the real world. Next is further factors that should be considered during human-centric design. First, age. For example, children and adults, they have different criteria, different characteristics. For children, they are smaller and they have shorter attention span. As for adults, they need a bigger text to be more clearer and more visible, and they have slow movements. So the system should adapt to this type of various age. Second is prior experience. As you know, there is more advanced users, moderate users, and also a novice user. So as for advanced, they are more used and proficient with the 3D input and output device. So more complex devices and more complex systems, more complex games would make them more interested and more immersed in the game. As for novice users, it must be more simplified and more learnable. It can be for the device, and also it can be for the system that they are going to play or they're going to see. Third is physical characteristics. Example of physical characteristics here is fatigue and user comfort. Fatigue, also known as the load tolerance and also the pose to maintain the balance, and it usually occur in the shoulder and the back, usually with when they need a certain objects, certain devices for them to use the VR. So it may apply more pressure and also eventually pain. So as for user comfort, is usually the absence of the pain and also maintaining the comfort throughout the game. That is very important for the human-centric design. And lastly, perceptual, cognitive, and motor abilities. Perceptual abilities here means the perception they have when they use the system. For example, their color perception, how contrast is it, how visible is it, how is the coloring in the environment, how is the sound. And next is cognition, where the system uses recall, recognize. So and for the users, when they play a game, how their planning of actions, how the path allows the users to think and how they think. And lastly, the motor, the movement of the user. Example, pressing the buttons and pointing the targets. So these are all considered for the human-centric design. Thank you.
Okay, I will discuss about inventing 3D user interface. Introduce informal approaches that have often been used in creating novel 3D UIs and interaction techniques. These approaches lie in a continuum between strict imitations of reality, naturalism or isomorphism, and magic, non-isomorphism, or things that can be found in the real world. Approaches should be taken as illustrative examples to help designers and developers ask the right questions that will lead to the development of compelling 3D UIs. Borrowing from the real world. The most basic, tried and true approach is to attempt to simulate or adapt from the physical world. Some basic approaches and techniques are simulating reality and adapting from the real world. Simulating reality is key in all simulation applications. The advantages of simulating reality is user already knows how to use the interface from everyday experience, so the time spent learning how to use is minimum. Can be implemented based either on the designer's intuitions and common sense or on the clearly specified technical design requirement. Advanced and special-purpose 3D interaction techniques not always necessary. Interaction with virtual space in this type of interface might be difficult, but if the real-world interaction is also frustrating and difficult, then this is actually a feature. Designers may, however, need to compromise on how realistic their simulation needs to be, because the limitations of current technologies, the simulation that we create may be far from real-life experience. Example, professional flight simulators. Needed realism depends per application. In virtual environment for entertainment, the goal might to provide visitors with a first-person immersive experience in an environment that cannot be normally experienced in real world. Exact visual realism might be less important than responsiveness and ease of learning of the application. For example, in a medical training simulator designed to teach medical students palpation skills in diagnosing prostate cancer, a realistic simulation is not required at all, so only primitive 3D visual model needed to learn the feel of human tissue. That is the main goal of the system. Adapting from the real world. Instead of attempting to replicate the real world, 3D UIs can also adapt artifacts, ideas, and philosophies from the real world. The metaphors are only a starting point. Interaction techniques should be carefully designed to match the requirements of the applications and limitation of the technology. Because users are already familiar with real-world artifacts, it is easy for them to understand the purpose and method of using 3D interaction techniques based on them. Adapting from 2D user interface. Adapting interaction techniques from traditional 2D UIs has been another common 3D UI design technique. 2D UIs and interaction have been truly studied and interaction paradigm in 2D interface are fully established, which makes it relatively easy for 3D interface designers to find an appropriate interaction technique. Second, almost all users of 3D UIs are already familiar with 2D interaction, so learning can be kept to a minimum. Third, interaction in 2 dimensions is significantly easier than interaction in 3 dimensions. The user has to manipulate only 2 degrees of freedom rather than 6 degrees of freedom. So, 2D interaction may allow users to perform some tasks like selection and manipulation with higher degree of precision. Finally, some common tasks do not always scale well into 3 dimensions. For example, writing and sketching is easier to perform in 2D than 3D. Various approaches exist, overlaying a 2D GUI on a 3D world. With little or no modification, 2D UI elements can be embedded directly into a 3D environment. Example, for desktop-based 3D and handheld or head-worn AR applications, the 3D scene is rendered into a window and traditional 2D GUI elements like menus, sliders, etc. can be attached to this window outside of 3D environment. Then 2D GUI as an element of the 3D environment and 2D interaction with 3D objects. This is example of the Eye of Ra hybrid interface, combining 2D and 3D interaction. Magic and aesthetic. Real powers of 3D UIs may not only lie in simulating or adapting real-world features, but also in creating a better reality by utilizing magical interaction techniques. The first advantages of magical interaction technique is it allows users to overcome many limitations, such as limitation to our cognitive, perceptual, physical, and motor capabilities. Secondly, reduce the effect of technological limitation through enhanced capabilities. For example, the flying technique enhances our motor capabilities by allowing us to reach further and travel in ways we can't in the real world by flying. Many approaches that can help to develop new magical techniques, including overcoming human limitation or specific metaphors. Cultural cliché and metaphors like flying carpet or voodoo doll technique that suggest the user can affect remote objects by interacting with their miniature, toy-like representation. The discussion of realism and magic in designing 3D UIs also directly relates to the aesthetics of the 3D environment. Realism often a main goal, but still hard to achieve. In many applications though, realism may not be needed.
Saya akan present untuk slide yang seterusnya, iaitu design guideline. Poin pertama ialah move wire and cable out of the way or use wireless solution when possible. Maksudnya di sini, gunakan wire atau kabel yang hanya diperlukan sahaja untuk mengerangkan beban pada equipment tersebut. Maksudnya, wire dan kabel yang kita connect pada laptop ataupun komputer. Poin yang seterusnya, provide physical and virtual barriers to keep the user and the equipment safe. Ini untuk mengalahkan halangan antara fizikal dan virtual untuk mengekalkan supaya user dan equipment tersebut selamat. Poin yang ketiga ialah limit interaction in free space. Maksudnya di sini, limitkan interaksi in free space to provide a device resting place. Poin yang keempat, design public system to be sanitary. Saya tak berapa pasti apa yang dimaksudkan dekat poin 4 ni, tapi Tapi mungkin apabila kita menggunakan sesuatu sistem tersebut, kita akan dapat menggunakan dengan senang atau baik tanpa ada gangguan apa-apa. Poin yang kelima adalah design for relatively short season and encourage break. Maksudnya di sini, contohnya apabila kita bermain VR game ataupun video game, kita perlukan short season ni and encourage break. Maksudnya kita boleh tekan butang exit tu ataupun pause. Untuk slide yang seterusnya dan poin yang seterusnya, design for compatible process. Saya tak berapa pasti untuk poin ni, tapi saya rasa apabila kita menggunakan VR tool tu, kita memerlukan posisi yang selesa seperti posisi tangan kita atau kepala kita. Poin yang seterusnya, ensure temporal and spatial compliance between feedback dimensions. Maksudnya apabila temporal and spatial compliance between feedback dimension ni, ini dapat membantu user memahami sesuatu sistem tersebut atau memahami task yang user buat. Contohnya dalam permainan video game. Poin yang seterusnya iaitu use constraint. Seperti yang kita tahu, seperti yang kawan saya sudah present di slide yang sebelumnya, terdapat 3 constraint yang boleh digunakan dalam 3D user interface ni. Contohnya physically realistic constraint, dynamic alignment tool and intelligent constraint. 3 jenis 3D UI ni can reduce user control over the interaction. Poin yang seterusnya iaitu consider using probe and passive feedback, particularly in highly specialized tasks. Maksudnya di sini, apabila user boleh melakukan task seperti dalam video game, user boleh melihat dan merasa the visual object. Mereka juga, this is also provide inexpensive physical and textile feedback. Poin yang seterusnya, use guide are visible in designing two-hander interface. Maksudnya apabila user menggunakan principle ni, ia dapat meningkatkan prestasi user dalam tugas-tugas tertentu seperti permainan video game. Dan poin seterusnya iaitu consider a real world tool and practice as a source of inspiration for 3D UI design. Contohnya dalam e-learning, pelajar boleh menggunakan VR headset untuk mereka belajar mempelajari subjek tersebut. Poin seterusnya iaitu consider designing 3D technique using principle from 2D interaction. Seperti semua tahu, adapting interaction technique from 2D UI has another common in 3D UI design technique. Untuk poin yang seterusnya iaitu use and invent magical technique. Maksudnya di sini, ia dapat memberi impak terhadap 3D UI dengan kualiti yang lebih real. Poin yang terakhir iaitu consider alternative to photorealistic artistic. Maksud photorealistic artistic ni apabila gambar yang digunakan dalam VR seperti dalam dunia yang sebenar. Okay, untuk conclusion, 3D UI design space is used. Sometimes difficult to decide how to pursue certain idea, and we have shown several permanent approaches and strategy to add the design process seperti yang saya senaraikan tadi. Okay, itu saja daripada obrolan kami. Terima kasih.